brought to you by Dale Carnegie of Orange County. This is the 411 on Leadership podcast, where we discuss common sense leadership practices with executives in Southern California to transform you into the leader people want to follow. This is the 411 on Leadership podcast, talking about the lesson of empowerment today. And so we want to say welcome to this podcast. My name is Steve Thomas. To my left, as always, is John Campbell. John, how is everything, sir?
Everything's going well. Mr. Thomas, how are you doing today?
Oh, just peachy.
Ready
Thanksgiving is
ready
coming
for
up.
Monday.
So
yeah, we're looking
grateful.
at a short week, and we're looking to have fun. Hopefully you're able to spend time with friends and family as we go forward on that. And we're looking for another day. And hey, if you're joining us today, we got to remind you that not only is this brought to you today by Dale Carnegie of Orange County, but also Sitch Radio makes this happen, Steve.
Yeah, he does.
On a weekly basis.
Yes,
Brian puts this together, and his team and crew does a fantastic job. We always want to encourage you that you've got a story to tell, so reach out to Sitch Radio. Links are in the show notes, and we'd love to hear from you. This is going to be an interactive session, as always. So please leave your comments, like, and subscribe. It means a lot to us to know that you're interested in the material, and it helps us as we go forward on the topics that impact you as a leader and your community.
Awesome. Well, listen, we're excited to have each and every one of you join us. And we're most excited because we are elated to have join us on our podcast today, talking about the lesson of empowerment in our series. These last couple of podcasts focused on success, failures, and lessons learned in 2021, or we like to affectionately call it the SFL.
The SFL.
And so with that being said, we want to introduce to you Susie Underwood. Susie is the general manager for Reid Metal Finishing, which is a local Southern California company focusing on anodizing and plating services. And so they work with not only the military industry, but also the aerospace industry, firearms, medical fields, along with a ton of other industries as well. And so with that being said, Susie, welcome to our podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Most definitely. Well, listen, Susie, as we're beginning our discussion here, first and foremost, tell us a little bit more about you and your leadership journey, and how did it lead you to Reid Metal?
Sure. So, I've had many different lessons over the time. I started at Reid about 7 years ago, and I started as the HR director there.
Okay.
So I got to really meet the people and understand their needs as well. And I think a lot of my humbleness came into play there, just to get to know them, and started getting into the operations as well. The end of 2019 is when we formally transitioned into me becoming the general manager for Reid.
Awesome.
Wow, very cool. And you had, even before Reid, you had some leadership journey experience, as we were talking before, taking you different places around the state and dropped in. So you said in your transition, something happened, it sounds like, right after transitioning into the leadership role there, right? There was this thing that happened around the world called a pandemic, right?
Right. Let me just, get into this new position, and then now we have a global pandemic going on. So, and not only that, I feel like Reid specifically had like a trifecta of things that were happening with Boeing 737 that was having issues at the end of 2019. We really kind of seen the domino effect the mid of 2020. But I think our ability to kind of adapt to that, and because we are considered a manufacturing company, we needed to understand, how do we do this with our team? And a lot of employees, their parents, and they had students, kids that were now being taught at home. So we needed to make those adjustments to change their schedules, have them come in earlier, or leave in, or come in later. But just having the agility to adapt to those situations really helped us.
Mm-hmm. We've had TJ, who is the CEO of Reid Metal Finishing, a while back. It seems like a long time ago.
Right, like 6
May.
months ago.
Yeah. That we had him. And one of the things that I've seen, which is excellent about, as we're talking about this issue of empowerment, is just to see it in action, and just to see how he has empowered you to lead your team here in Southern California. And so, what would you say, Susie, is an event? I would say these past couple of years, what has been an event for you that has really affected and impacted your leadership style?
Right. To specify on an exact event would be very hard because there have been so many. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It hasn't been a specific event. I think it was more so TJ in this case, who trusted us to really take on our roles, gave us that autonomy to, okay, you know how to do your job, go for it. And, just with him giving us that trust really kind of gave us that ownership and empowerment to say, you know what, we need to prove to him and to our team members that we can do this.
Well, and just to let our listeners know that we know about what happened, but you can let us know. So TJ was here in Orange County, but he's no longer. So now he had to be able to leave and entrust you, right? Is that what?
Yes, correct. So TJ, he's the president, CEO of Reid Metal Finishing. He left, I want to say in the beginning of this year, to venture a new company in South Dakota. So with that being said, it kind of left us to kind of run the show. Me specifically.
Right.
But we have a great team member. If I didn't have the support system from him and the team that we have at Reid as well, like there's no way I could have done it by myself. We have great managers, great supervisors who really, especially this year, have supported one another. Unfortunately, we had to reduce our staff last year. So just to have that support from everybody just really means a lot to me, and I'm sure TJ is very thankful as well. So.
We've had some comments coming on. Thank you, Todd, so much for joining us. Always a supporter of the podcast. I want to say thank you so much for that. Also, Wayne as well. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely agree that teamwork does make the dream work. And so it's important that we need each other and to really accomplish those goals organizationally or team-wise that we want to accomplish and really live up to our full potential. It really takes everyone. So thanks so much for the comments. If you have any questions and or additional comments, please go ahead and put that in the chat. And so, Susie, when we're talking about empowerment, I think about what gets us to that point of empowerment. It wasn't by accident that TJ selected you to lead this organization here in Southern California. For me, I think we can all agree. I mean, that's kind of the epitome of empowerment to even leave the state and be like, hey, you know what, Susie, go ahead and take it from here. And that just speaks to the leader that you are and how much he trusts you. I want to talk about an element that's maybe not as, leadership-wise per se, or you don't hear a lot in leadership circles, and that is the whole concept of humility. When I think about humility, that is just one of those things where you can't have empowerment without humility.
Right.
So what does humility look like to you, Susie, and how does that show up in how you lead your team at Reid?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I mean, it was a very humbling experience just to get proposed that offer. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that, and I think was what made the difference was that I was already doing it, but I wasn't looking for the power or a title per se. And I think that's really what drove TJ in this case to say, wow, she's already doing it. Why don't we just give her the title in this case? So, going back to your question on how I relay that to the rest of the team, I think they see day in and day out I'm there. I have conversations with them. And it's as simple as a good morning to people in production specifically. That to me is very humbling. And it can go very, very far, or just to get to know what they're doing this weekend, or how are their kids doing, calling them by their names, something that I learned at Dale Carnegie.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. So all of that I think has enabled me to be where I am.
Well, if I can drill down on that, because we laugh about it and we joke about it a little bit. Why is it important to call people by their names? What makes a difference with doing that?
I mean, we're humans. We're not just another number. And I think today more than ever, I think employers should realize, like, we're not, I mean, before I feel like there was this perception that you should be lucky to have a job. No, we are lucky to have employees, with this new wave of employees that are coming in. It's a two-way street. We should be appreciative of what we have and vice versa, So.
It's funny, we Dale Carnegie released some research, and this all around that concept of humility, and that's why I bring that, in addition to what a great practice that is, to think of others, because part of what humility is in a leadership contest based on our research. And by the way, if you have registered for this particular podcast on our LinkedIn page, you'll be getting a copy of this research that we'll be referring to after the podcast is done. And so the research paper focused on the idea of humility and what makes that up in a leadership context, or in a business context, I should say. It being others focused, it's being self-aware, and it's also creating a safe environment. In the case of the workplace, a psychologically safe environment. And so, when I'm hearing about the conversations that you're having and just connecting with all of your team, not just like one department, it just shows how others focus plays a huge role in that. I want to get your thoughts on both of you. I want to get your thoughts on this. I do want to, a quote comes to mind. It's by C.S. Lewis. And the quote is, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting that confused. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. I think that's what it is. I'm probably jacking up. Here's my point of all that. I'm like, I could try to do it again, but I feel like we'll do the whole podcast figuring out that one quote. Here's the point I want to make, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. Is like when we think about that in leadership, we feel like we have to be self-deprecating, right? We have to feel like, we have to, when people throw us when people try to appreciate us or recognize us, what's our normal response? No, not really. I'm not this. And so it can come across as a fake type of humility where, when it comes to humility, we know what we can do. We have the confidence that we can do the job that we're tasked to do.
Right.
However, humility is thinking of others more. Knowing what we need to do, but thinking of, how we can best serve our team, rather than think of like, okay, man, I'm not this, or, or I'm overestimating my abilities and stuff. We're removing ourselves out the picture and are thinking more about our teams and that being a focus. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think another big factor to me has been vulnerability as well. It's just being transparent with the team, and just being vulnerable, I think is huge. Where if sometimes I can't be there, I don't have to tell people where I am, but I do because I want to be transparent. Or if I have things going on, oh, guys, I'm taking a vacation, or, I think that alone is also very, very helping.
Yeah.
So,
have you found that the being vulnerable was seen as a taboo in leaders before? Or is it something that you were intentionally thinking about, I don't want to be that way, or was it just something that came naturally to you?
I think it came natural to me. Yeah, I think that's just something that I've grown up with, and it just kind of comes off natural. But I can especially in the industry that I'm in, manufacturing, aerospace, you have to, and yeah, there's places where you have to be more assertive and firm, right? But I think, again, when it comes to your team, we're there more than we are at home. So to have that camaraderie, that culture, to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to help one another out and support each other, it's super, super helpful.
I feel like I don't want to mess up C.S. Lewis. I'm going to read the actual quote. I'm going to go off memory. It says, "Humility is not thinking less of yourself; it's thinking of yourself less." That's the official quote by C.S. Lewis. Want to make sure I get that right.
Just to give you props, I think you said those words that way like 3 times, and you were thinking of yourself so much less that you didn't trust. But but thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And it's important because a lot of times as leaders, I know what I'm doing. I'm in charge. I know the way, maybe I know the way better than you. And so I want, here's, it's my way or the highway, or my way is the right way. And sometimes in those things, I mean, being able to take vacation and to trust our team and empower them to be able to operate, function, and to tackle maybe challenges when we're not there, because stuff comes up constantly. And if our team's not empowered, are we tied to our cell phones? Because what if an emergency comes up and they have to call me? The key of seeing empowerment is to be able to go, I don't have to have my phone with me 24/7 because I've empowered my team to address those issues if they come up.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And then I guess that goes back to the autonomy, right? And trust that you have in your team when you're consistently micromanaging. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many great ideas come from the workforce because they are in there day in and day out to hear some of the creativity and practices and processes that they come up with is like astonishing. And again, that comes with autonomy that you give them.
Yeah. We're talking with Susie Underwood. She is the general manager for Reid Metal Finishing here in Southern California. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions for Susie, go ahead and please put that in the chat. Again, we would love to hear from you. I think we may have a couple that have come in through the chat.
Well, Susie, you got a comment from Natalie, is it Marashimo? And says,
I think you may know her. I'm not 100% sure.
Susie is a great leader. We are all so lucky to have her.
Oh, thank you, Natalie.
Very well deserved. And so, and again, the great thing from what we see, and we've worked with each other in terms of like you're one of our clients, and we've connected, and to see you all put what we're talking about into practice, I think for us. When we see that, you have been empowered to lead this team here in Southern California while the president is, able to, be in another venture somewhere else, that just speaks volumes on this issue of empowerment and what that looks like when it actually is played out and not just spoken about, especially, with you being a woman in the industry and a Latina woman in the industry, there needs to be more stories like this that comes out to see that, hey, people are not just talking about this, but they're actually doing it and they're actually being successful as a result of that. So with that being said, then, as you look to lead your team, and remind me again, Susie, how many people are you leading here in your organization here?
I think we have about 65 now.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So as you're leading your team, how then does empowerment play a role in maintaining that inclusive work environment?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I mean, I think there's you can inspire and you can influence people, but when you give them the ability or that authority just to be empowered, that's a huge difference. Whether we give them Dale Carnegie courses, we prepare them with the tools that's what gets them there. Because anybody can influence and inspire. We can talk about it all day, but what are you actually doing to get your people there? So I think with that being said, if we just continuously give them the tools needed, then we can absolutely cultivate that atmosphere.
And I know that's currently one of the things, and I'll throw it to you, John. I know that's one of the things you are currently doing right now, is that you always are continually investing in your people, preparing in your people for that next step. And so, we're grateful to be able to partner with you in doing that. John?
Well, I think it's important because I think there's two elements, that whole idea of caught and taught. And there's some things about mirroring a mentor and seeing what they're doing on the job, but there's something about instructionally saying, here's why those things work, and teaching to those principles so that you can understand and go, well, that's why this person is successful, or that's why this activity works so well on the environment. And back to one of your comments, I think Richard had a comment to that. He said, servant leadership can open up the best in your workforce. The team that is empowered brings about creativity and innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we have that in our core values, ideas. And I think TJ touched on that last time he was here. It's, oh God, I hope I don't butcher that.
Don't worry. I messed up on C.S. Lewis. See, if I can mess up on C.S. Lewis, then,
it's innovation, dedication. accountability, and service. So yeah, we have that in our core values, and we're consistently advocating to those as well.
Well, that's an interesting element. I apologize,
Sure.
Steve.
No, you're good.
We're talking about empowerment, but accountability is part of that empowerment cycle. Is to be
most
able
definitely.
to say,
Yes.
here's those things, but we're also going to inspect and take a look at what.
Oh,
you're doing.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, to some degree, I mean, yes, you give them the autonomy, but hold them accountable as well. And I think we're all adults, you know, and we should be treated as such.
Sure.
I don't want to be treated as a child, but at the same time, how do we hold each other accountable? Vice versa, too. Hold me accountable as well.
Sure.
So.
Now, there seems to be a lot more, not seems, but these days, especially in relation to the pandemic and the ripple effects of that we're seeing, you know, in business today, the ripple effects with the for clients that you deal with, especially in like aerospace and other departments. I mean, it seems like things are at a higher risk than they normally would be.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, you know, tell us again, as we're looking at empowering others, like, what is that looking like for your team now, knowing that they're higher risk? Because, you know, if we make that, I mean, no one wants to make mistakes, but at the same time, mistakes happen, and sometimes mistakes could be critical. And when we talk about, you know, accountability, we do still need to hold our teams accountable. So, you know, how can we still, you know, or what are your thoughts on how we can still empower our teams in light of a higher sense of risk now, and what does that look like there for your team?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, we have processes in place to follow. But again, we're all humans and we can commit mistakes. But we don't necessarily, we can condemn a person, right? Or punish them for doing something wrong accidentally. But we have a dialogue with a person. What happened? What can we do in the future to prevent this from happening again? So it's again, a dialogue that we have with the person so that we can learn together how do we avoid it from happening.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it speaks to, again, the research where we talk about humble leadership and that being the basis for empowerment, creating that safe environment, right?
Exactly.
That psychologically safe environment to say, hey, you know what? Let's have a discussion on what happened here. What was your logic behind why this was done? And let's kind of work that through and obviously do things differently where we need to. And that just plays such a critical role in empowering people, as opposed to, hey, you know what? You really messed this up. You know, you're out of here. I'm going to write you up, or without any type of dialogue or conversation. So again, it just really speaks to that psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting that as we empower too, I was thinking about the illustration used in the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends, Influence People, when they're at a manufacturing facility and they had multiple shifts and they were trying to figure out how to inspire the team. And after the first shift finished one day and they realized how many of these items they produced, and they produced 3, took a big piece of chalk and wrote a giant 3 on the floor. And the next shift comes in and they see a 3, and what's this all about? Well, the first shift made 3. And they said, well, we can do better than that.
Right.
And so they came out, and at the end of their shift, they crossed it out and wrote a 5. So the first shift comes back in the next day and sees 5 and go, well, man, we can do better than that. And so they made 6, and it's, you know, and so the empowerment say, you know, when we inspire and encourage our teams, and it wasn't like, oh, we're better than you, but it was this
It's
kind
healthy
of this
competition.
healthy competition.
It's healthy competition, and we absolutely, yes, we absolutely do that too. And it helps. It helps because we are a service company too. Our work will fluctuate, but to know, you know, what other departments are doing. You know, we have our anodized department and we have our plating department. We have these, again, healthy competitions. Well, I made more money than they did, or I did. Well, and then it's again, it pushes them to want to do more, but it's completely healthy.
Absolutely. And that type of healthy competition, it is empowering, right?
Yeah.
It's another method in which we could empower our teams, because when we look at, going back to your illustration, the accomplishment after that, you know, that sense of pride, like, hey, you know what, this is what we've done. Like, okay, we can do some more. That in and of itself is empowering. So we're talking with Susie Underwood. She is the general manager of Reid Metal Finishing. And thank you all so much for your comments. We see plenty of those. Thanks so much, Terrence, for your comments. just mentioning the importance of consistency. I believe you're echoing Wayne there, and also empowerment as well, and the 7 principles of servant leadership, part of that being accountability, which is critical to our own vision and our successes. So thank you so much for those comments. And so as we're beginning to land the plane as it relates to our conversation here, Susie, what would you say is that one practice? I mean, and there's a ton. I feel like we've talked about so much and so many things that leaders could do in order for them to empower their teams, especially, as we are in the current challenges that we are right now in a work environment. What would you say is one practice that you would pass on to leaders to help them to empower their teams?
So I had 3, but I think I wanted to.
If you have 3, that's fine. We can take 3.
No, but I think this will go right hand in hand on what we were talking about. But I put down embrace and inspire employee autonomy. And again, that's a very loaded one. But again, if we just inspire and we empower autonomy, the return on that will be immenseful.
Is it okay if I drill down on that?
Sure.
Do you have an example of how you were able to do that at Reid Metal Finishing?
Yeah, so I know Natalie is listening right now, and I'm so blessed to have her part of our team. She joined us a couple months ago, but she comes with a wealth of knowledge, and I wanted to really work with her on the upcoming year to really hone in on our HR department, because that, again, relates to the rest of the company as far as company culture. So I had her work on a couple proposals for next year on what we can do to really continue to cultivate this, oh God, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, but she came up with a couple proposals. So now we're...
Okay.
Again, looking into it and to actually implement that, I think is going to be very, very good for her. So.
Very cool. Well, thank you. We really appreciate your time and coming and joining us with us on a Monday morning and talking through leadership things. It really means a lot to us to be able to share with our environment. And Steve, kind of what's that next step? I'm a leader. I've heard these things. I've heard the great examples. What do I do to invest in my team or in myself?
So a couple things we can do, and we'll share, and then we'll get where we can connect with you, Susie, afterwards. So again, if you're listening to this podcast, we were making references to research that we've done as it relates to humble leadership. We will be sending that to you via email if you have registered for this particular event. In addition to that, if you look at our website, ocdalecarnegie.com, you could also find that white paper on humble leadership. But then we also work with our teams to help them to be others focused, to help them to be self-aware. That would help them to create that psychologically safe environment, whether that's how do we coach our teams towards that higher level of performance to really help them build their confidence. How are we delegating tasks and delegating in a way that we're not taking it back, but that when we delegate it, we are empowering our teams by having them handle those tasks, as well as what are ways in which we can best handle mistakes, in which we can have those conversations where our team feels educated, inspired, and empowered to do their role. And so we've got our programs, leadership training for managers, for beginning managers, developing your leadership potential, that is all geared towards helping leaders to create that environment to empower their teams. And so with that being said, Susie, what are ways in which people that are listening to this podcast can connect with you online?
Yeah, so I'm not very heavily involved in social media.
Okay, all right. That's it.
I just have so much going on at home and at work, but I am on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And then you guys can visit our website as well. It's rmfusa.com. And you can check out our services there as well. But we're local here. If you guys do want to stop by, we're in Santa Ana.
All right.
So.
Well, awesome. Well, Susie, we're just so grateful to have you, to join us on this podcast. Any words from you as we enter into a week of gratitude?
Yeah, well, always we want to be able to give thanks and appreciate the situations we're at. It's so easy for us to focus in on the negative things in our life and in our work environment, but most of us have a fantastic situation, and it's important for us to have an attitude of gratitude and to give thanks as we're looking into this podcast right before Thanksgiving here, 2021. And thankful for you, Steve.
Definitely thankful for you, John, and just everything that you bring to this podcast, and for what you're doing for not only the organizations that you're working with, but just for our connection of these past couple of years. We also want to say how grateful we are for each and every one of you that have taken the time to either watch our podcast, whether it's via LinkedIn Live or YouTube or Facebook, or take the time afterwards to listen, whether it be via Apple iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts or any other major podcasting platform. We want to say thank you to you, and we're just so grateful that you have chosen to spend some time with us as we have discussions with leaders as it relates to how we can become that leader that others want to follow. So with that being said, we want to thank our producer also, Brian, and the team over at Sitch Radio for making all this happen, and Joey as well. Joey's our one of our newer producers, and he's doing a great and awesome job so far. So we want to say thank you for doing that. And again, we want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be sure to be grateful. And as we always like to say here, managers, they light a fire under people, but leaders, we light a fire in people. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Ah.